Hi everybody, welcome to Drafts episode of the Academic Writing Seminar. Everybody's heard me ranting, watched the assignment writing seminar. That drafts are probably the most important thing in getting a good grade for your assignment. The very first thing you should be doing before you even get to this point is make a plan. So plan, then draft. Even if that plan is made up in your head. Why? Because it gives you a scaffold. And I like to break my drafts up into 4 sections. We have section 1 is ideas. So, what do you think we should be checking for in our ideas section? All right. Sorry, Todd, I just paused the recording if that looks weird. So we're looking at ideas. So the first thing, have you actually read the question? Have you actually read the question? Most of the time, not really. Have you read the instructions? The reason we make a plan, in our plan, we list the main points. So in our plan, we list out the main points, because then in our draft, in section 1, we ask ourselves, have we covered the main points? Now, this is where a lot of people, especially those that are passionate and have done debating and stuff like that, struggle. In every one of our paragraphs, have we covered one idea? So each paragraph in an essay, report, whatever you're writing, should have one main idea. Now, I want everyone to have a think, why is that so? Why is it important? Because each paragraph should have one point and one point only. You finish making that point, make a new paragraph. Include 2 ideas in the same paragraph, and people get confused. Okay. Now, does each of these ideas actually help to answer the question? People, I see it all the time, write this beautiful assignment, great arguments, great sources, but they don't actually answer the question. You don't answer the question, no matter how good your writing is and your sources and all of that, you will not pass. Everyone says I'm harsh, but that is just the truth. Okay. Do you have supporting evidence? To back up your ideas? So take 30 seconds. Tell me why, or think of why it's important to have supporting evidence for your ideas. Why is that important? So Izzy says, so it shows you've done your research. Perfect. None of us are top experts in our field. So we don't get to come up with ideas. We have to use evidence that other people have provided. Okay, another thing, great, you've got all this supporting evidence. Have you cited it correctly? Now, before I go any further, should you do all of this and everything we're going to talk about in these 4 sections of the draft, should you hand it to your teacher before or after you do this? Should you hand your teacher something that is 50% of what you could have done just because you're handing in a draft and oh, well, it's only a draft? And this is the biggest rant that I go on in these seminars, is that your draft should be as good as you think you can get it without your teacher's help. If you give your teacher something that's worth 20%, they can only mark you on that 20%. And so give them something that's 100%. Because then they can mark you on everything. If you give your teacher something that is not proofread, it's not cited, then all they're going to do is tell you proofread and cite. They're not actually going to look at what you've actually written. And nor should they. If you don't put any effort into your draft, why should they put any effort into the feedback? Think about it like that. Okay, so you've cited your evidence correctly. Have you got a properly, what's the word? Properly formatted reference list. Why is it important? Because we need to be able to find the sources that you have cited. Okay, big one. Stick to your argument. Don't change it halfway through. Stick to your original argument. Don't contradict yourself. Don't use evidence that you don't understand because it will make you look silly. If you say, this evidence proves my point and it doesn't, you will lose marks. So the very first, this is the ideas section of the draft. So have you answered the question? Have you followed the instructions? Have you covered the main points that you came up with in your plan? One idea per paragraph to keep things consistent. Have I answered the question? Get someone else to read it. Then get them to tell you what they think you were trying to say, and that'll give you an idea of whether or not you've answered the question. Have I got supporting evidence that is of sufficient standard? If you need 5 references, 1 web page, a government report, and 3, what's the word? Journal articles would be sufficient. Is it correctly cited? My biggest gripe is when students don't reference in the correct style. There's so many tools out there now that will do it for you. So have I cited it correctly? Is my reference list, if they ask you to do it in Harvard and you do it in APA, you're going to get 0 marks for referencing, even though you've done the referencing. The biggest one, stick to your argument. All right. So this one, the second part of, or the second thing you should be looking out for is the structure. So take a minute and think of all the different styles of academic writing you can think of. Different kinds of assignments you've been asked for. Wait a second. So we have main ones. And let's look at persuasive. So if I ask you to compare and contrast the honor of the characters in the novel Macbeth, what structure would you use? So if I asked you to compare and contrast the morality of the characters in Beth, you would write an essay, or a comparative essay. If I said, I want you to go into that room or write a piece that tells or wants people to make people believe that the coronavirus is not real, what would you use? You would write a persuasive. So I just want to write code. COVID not real will come under persuasive. If I asked you to tell me or write me something that told me everything I need to know about pneumonia, each of these has a completely different structure to the others. Essay and persuasive piece, kind of the same. But it's not just the structure. It's the language that's being used. So remember that you've got different kinds. The teachers make it really easy for you. They will tell you exactly what they want. Essay, report, persuasive piece, reflection. Now we're looking at paragraph structure inside. So if we're talking about a body paragraph, what are some things that it should have? So we need topic sentence that tells us what the sentence is or what the paragraph is about. We would put examples to explain what we're talking about. Evidence. Analysis. If you're writing an essay, have you actually analyzed? The evidence has to support the topic sentence. And why is it important for evidence to back up what is said in the topic sentence? Because in the topic sentence, you're going to make a claim. You need to back up that claim with evidence, and that is why you need to have good, solid references and sources. When you're looking at your sources now, the structure, you need to integrate the ideas from your sources into your arguments in a clear way. You need to paraphrase. Now, why is paraphrasing important? Why is it important to paraphrase? Paraphrasing is putting things in to your own words. Paraphrasing puts ideas into your own words. If you were to just copy and paste from your source, that would be plagiarism, and you would fail. This is the biggest one I take issue with sometimes. Logical flow of ideas. Logical flow of ideas. We have to start with an introduction, paragraph 1. That's the basic structure of an essay and a basic report. Why is it important that we have a logical flow of ideas from beginning to end? So when you're reading something and you read the introduction tells us the main points. Main point 1. Then we use these main points and these evidence to make recommendations and analysis. If you start mixing all of them together, it's really hard for the reader to actually understand what you're talking about and what your point is. Now, you do need to link the paragraphs together using linking sentences, and we'll look at that in one of the other recordings. So they need to be separate, but we need to link them. They are separate ideas, but they're all, so that's number 3. They're separate ideas, but they need to be linked in a synchronous way. Now, this is where creating a mind map really helps. Okay, so section 3 of our draft, or our draft analysis, yes, language. Why is using the appropriate language? And I don't mean not using swear words. Think of what we know is academic writing. Why is using the correct language important? So, Izzy says, make you look professional. We use formal. Formal, objective, and tentative language. Tentative meaning we don't exaggerate. So if I am making, so I need to make sure it's appropriate to the discipline. So this means using appropriate to discipline, meaning if you're talking about medical stuff, don't use colloquialism, use medical language, use scientific language. Someone had a broken leg, someone had a fractured femur. And again, something we've got to go through and make a recording for. Grammar and punctuation. Have I used the correct grammar? Is my punctuation consistent? That's something I'm going to go through in recording. Here we go. Read it aloud. Does it make sense? Can you read a sentence without having to take a breath? Have we used contractions? So when you're reading it aloud, check for flow. Check that the ideas flow along. Get your friend to read, get your parents to read. So in a piece of academic writing, you'll have your own ideas and ideas from sources. Your assignment should be written in a way that the teacher can tell which one of those are your ideas and which of the are your from sources. You need to paraphrase correctly. So again, using the appropriate language. And again, at this stage, you check your citation formats. Make sure you've used the right style. Make sure you're my brain. Make sure that all the capital letters and italics are in the right place. Paraphrasing and getting that right is super important. More important than anything else. Why? Because if you don't paraphrase properly, you can fail for plagiarism, even if it's unintentional. This is my favorite part of the final stage. Proofreading. Now, what do you think the proofreading stage relates to? I'll give you a visual. University assignment that I've been for someone. Get red pen out and go nuts. Print it out, get your red pen out. Every spelling mistake, if something doesn't make sense, just put a red mark through it and come back to it later. So check your spelling and grammar. Check your spelling and grammar. Use a red pen, not a red whiteboard marker, but a red pen. I know everybody's about computers and I have spell check and grammar check on my Microsoft Word. Yeah, it doesn't always work because the spelling and grammar in context of what you're writing. Print it out and go mad with a red pen. Read one at a time. What most people do when they're reading, they're actually looking 3 lines ahead of where they think they're reading. So read one line at a time, one paragraph at a time. Again, if it doesn't make sense, read it aloud. Get someone to read it aloud to you. Read it aloud, then get someone else to read it aloud too. Again, check all citations, all references. If it's a report, make sure you have the headings properly. Check margins, because they'll often tell you the margins, spacing, font size. If you get your referencing bang on and you format it the way they say, that's up to 15% of your mark for that assignment. The world's easiest 15%. Now, take a minute. Page numbers, sorry. Tables, make sure you've labeled your tables. So when you take a minute to think, why is it important that I do this before I give my draft to my teacher? Because if your teacher has to, we've just spent the better part of 35 minutes figuring out what to do, how to read your draft, and guess what your teacher has to do? They then have to go through this entire thing. They might get one of these sections done. If you do it all for them, I guarantee you they'll put so much more effort into their draft feedback than had you not put in the effort. So, moral of the story is, don't hand in a draft that isn't, something that you're happy with. You want that draft to be pretty much as close to perfect as it could be. As good as you can get the assignment without some kind of input from the teacher. Because your teacher will look more fondly upon your assignment than had you not. This will be the last live one of these. I'll upload your recordings over the next week or so for the last couple of weeks. There's a lot of stuffing about over the Christmas. Do apologize for that. These were meant to go for like 50 minutes, but there wasn't many students in here interacting, so it meant we got through everything a lot quicker. So thanks everyone. You'll see the recordings go up over the next week or so, and I'll see you all soon.